Alrighty, so today I'm going to show you how to set up your brand new Poursteady from unboxing to its first pour. Now what you're going to need to get started first is your brand new Poursteady. You're going to need your boiler, box cutter, possible need for scissors, a number 2 screwdriver, and any device that can hook up to the internet. So to get started, grab your box cutter, and we're going to nice and gently cut through. Don't worry about having to scratch through the machine. If you cut it this way, our packaging makes sure to prevent any damage that could be done to your Poursteady. This thing gets down here. Once you open it up, you'll be able to just grab your Poursteady right underneath. Make sure to hold down the box a little bit. Sometimes it's easier to have 2 people help you with this. And what you're going to want to do with the packaging, you're going to want to break it down and hang on to it. Always good to have it in case you need to ship the Poursteady to a new site. That way there's no damage in the transit. Look at that. Beautiful stainless steel 3 cup. Take your scissors or your box cutter. Undo the wrapping that held everything into place. Looks like we have our goodie bag filled with tubing, as well as power supplies, wires, Wi-Fi dongle, communication wire, toothbrush, and the manual. And we're going to go ahead and for the setup, turn your Poursteady so that you are facing the buttons. This is what we refer to as barista side. And we're going to start our operations in opening up the smart side. Alrighty, so the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is that we're going to open up that smart side, which will make the hookup process much easier. So take that number 2 screwdriver, and we're going to take off that top cap. And then we're going to go ahead and take off these side panels. Now while the Poursteady does have an opening underneath this sheet end, getting your hands in there in order to hook up all the connections you need to is quite challenging, and to be honest will take more time than if you just take this panel right off. Extra bonus, it gives you a little bit more familiarity with how the Poursteady works for you to be able to get to know your machine. And when removing the last screw, make sure to hold onto that sheet end. That way it doesn't slide down. Slide this side panel off. Put it somewhere so it doesn't get scratched or damaged. And then we're going to grab our goodie bag filled with tubes. So let's see what we got in here. Since it's a 3 cup, we have our Marco UC4 extender. We have our drain elbow tubing. Then we have our insulated tubing. So we're going to go ahead and hook this one up first. And you're going to want to make sure to hook this side up to the Poursteady. So just feed it through the bar. And we're going to go right here. Next up in order, we're going to have our drain elbow, which will be this tube here. And this is used to catch any water, liquid, or coffee that you pour into the drain at the bottom through the filter rack. And then already attached, we have our purge tubing. And we're going to go ahead and feed that through into an open source for catching any unwanted water. So the way this all flows, right here, we're going to have the water going up from the boiler through the flow meter. All water for coffee will pass through this valve here, go into the system through the valve into the nozzle, and then all the water that didn't will go right through here and towards an outlet drain. That way you make sure that all the water that goes into your coffee is at that perfect temperature, and anything that was sitting in the lines gets flushed right out. So a good step to do while we're at this process is to make sure the SD card didn't get dislodged during shipping. So you're going to go ahead right here It's going to press up and you'll hear a click. If the SD card moves out, that means that it stayed in lodging before. You can just click it again. And if it clicked into place, that means it was dislodged. So you're all set once you can no longer feel that SD card poking out. Alrighty, so now that we got the tubes hooked up to the Poursteady, let's get them hooked up to our boiler. We went ahead and we already plugged it in to get it to the 96 degrees Celsius. But just to make sure that our Marco UC10 boiler here is at its correct settings, you're going to go ahead and hold power and eco mode. And what we can see right here, we have our set temperature that you can change. Time dispense, make sure that's set to 0. Pauses, set to 0. Pause time, set to 0. So you're going to select the power button, and that's going to allow you to cycle through everything, while the eco button will let you change the different values. Again, you want to have everything set to those zeros in time dispensing, pause, and pause time. Otherwise, you're not going to have your boiler to be able to be set up with the Poursteady, and you'll get inconsistent, choppy pours. Once you're all finished, save and exit. We'll reset, and you're all set and ready again. So let's go ahead. Let's hook up these tubes. First, we have our drain tube as well as our purge tube, which you can go and put it in your open drain or wherever that you would set up to have any water drained out. Make sure to stay up with FDA codes in your local area. Next, we're going to go and we're going to hook up our flow tube. But as we can see right here, we have looping going on, which is going to cause bubbles in the line because this is too large for our purposes here in our bar setup. If you end up having any of these kind of dips, a bend, a loop, a curl, you're going to get bubbles in your line, and that's going to affect your pours. You're going to have less water going through. It's going to make your coffee much, much smaller, and then you're going to be wondering what's going on. So the best thing to do is to make sure that these lines are done correctly the first time during setup. And you can cut these lines to make sure that it fits perfectly. Make sure to cut from the end that gets connected to the Poursteady and not the end that gets connected to the boiler, because as you can see, there are two different sides and two different fittings. Luckily, we already have ours pre-cut for this bar. So, as you can see, this is much smaller, but that's okay. If you end up moving to a larger space and you need to move the boiler to another side, give us a call at purchasing@poursteady.com and we'll be able to provide you with a new tubing. Slide this back up. And look at that. You can have a little bit of slack in here, but as long as you don't have these dips that's kind of like that, you're good. Just make sure it's nice and steady to go up the Poursteady. Since we went ahead and we made sure that the tubes underneath by the boiler are looking good, let's make sure it's still looking good up here by the Poursteady. As we can see here, there's no bends, twists, or kinks that would also cause issues and bubbles popping up in the lines. Our drain elbow tube also is nice. A lot of times you might end up getting some compression like this, which will cause anything in the filter to just stay up there and not drain properly. So if you have any little bends, you can go ahead and lightly massage it and you'll be all set. Same thing with this tube, it's fairly rigid, so it shouldn't be too much problems. And now that we got that all set up, let's grab our goodie bag and let's hook the rest of this up. So we have our tube brush for cleaning, set that off to the side. The user manual, which is explaining everything that we have in this video, but I do highly still recommend reading it. It'll give you great information on how to set up your bar, what hole to drill into the bar to get all these lines through, some maintenance and network requirements. We have our boiler communication wire, which is very important. This is what tells the boiler when to activate and turn on based on button punches for the Poursteady. And since this is a US machine, we have our 110 volt plug and our power supply. Unbox this. Fantastic. Alrighty, so first thing you're going to do is, without hooking this up yet to power, you're just going to place it right up here. If we were doing an Ethernet connection, this is where our Ethernet connection would go, but we're going to do wireless today. And as long as you do not have this directly over the boiler or anywhere that's heat, you can go ahead and fix this underneath the bar. And now, the communication wire. You're gonna have two ends for here. You're gonna have the small two-pronged black end. That's gonna go right up, connect here, and you'll hear a click. All right, and then to connect the communication wire to the boiler, you're gonna have this little clip right here, be on the same side here, and you can also hear a click down. Alrighty, so now that we got everything all nice and connected, we're gonna go ahead, let's power this on. Connect it through here, and then to any power source, plug it in. There's no on or off switch on the Poursteady, so this is already turning on, and we're gonna see the lights on the board are all turning. We have our main light here, we have our Techno soft lights, and the BeagleBone black light. This process usually takes about 2 to 5 minutes depending. However, have some good indicators to let you know when your Poursteady is all set and ready to go. Alright, so we right now just had our button lights turn on. That means that it booted successfully, and now we're going to wait for the homing process. Indication that we are now going to begin the homing process. You're going to see the nozzle move back, forward again, and then to one side. Back to the other. Alrighty, now that it's all connected, we are ready to make our first test cup. Alrighty, so we're gonna grab our trusty Kalita. Okay. And we're gonna also put in one of our filters to catch any water and make sure that it wets correctly. Go ahead, press the button. And your first pour is going to be pushing a lot of air through, so it won't make that perfect measurement the first time around, but will second or third. So we can already see here that our pre-programmed recipe is kicking in and programmed into the Poursteady. Alright, this means that our filter rinse is now done, and we can continue on to the rest of the pour. Again, our stream is coming out really nice. There is no leaks or damage over here. And this will run through the first full cycle, get rid of all that air, and let you get familiar with how the Poursteady works. Alright, so now that we know the Poursteady is connected properly, that it is connected to internet, we have our water is flowing correctly, and it is all set up perfectly. It's time to put that side panel back on and get ready for business. So when we're here, we're going to have this nameplate here is towards the bottom, as well as the caution stickers will be facing you. And that's going to slide right back on again into those tracks on the end plate. I'm going to make sure that you're not pinching any wires down here. And there is a little bit of a trick to this. What you're going to want to do is put in the screws about halfway at first. That way you make sure that it sticks on nice and snug once we tighten it, and that you don't have one hole misaligned, making you have to untighten and retighten again. The other trick that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put all the screws and then tighten them by going in diagonal patterns rather than just in one row and the other, because that will make sure that everything is nice and flush. And there are 8 screws for the side panel in total, 2 screws that go into the top cap. And before we finalize and tighten up all these, let's get on that tight cap for alignment. Just slides right on. Put in those 2 flat screws. And this one you can tighten right away since we already have it resting on the plate. Take your non-dominant hand, push up. You're going to screw in the first 2. Then we're going to go into the other opposing corners. You can go ahead now, release that hand, tighten up the last 4. Alrighty, so now I'm going to show you how to set up your Poursteady on our Wi-Fi settings. Right now we moved over to our beautiful 5-cup model. And to do so, all you're gonna need to do is just log on to your my.poursteady account and go to the Poursteady serial number that you're trying to hook up to the internet. As we can see here, that our lamp that shows that the Poursteady is online is currently grayed out, which means it is not online. And if I go to change a recipe, we won't get any flashes on our Poursteady buttons to show that the recipe's been changed. So we need to set up that Wi-Fi. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna open up our list of networks, and you're gonna scroll through all of them until you can find our one network that has our Poursteady name. So it'll be Poursteady-PS and your serial number. Go ahead and click on that and click on connect. And then once it's connected, it'll redirect you over to our portal. If it can't be reached, all you have to do is just wait a couple of seconds or hit refresh, and that will bring up that portal screen. From there, under SSID, you're going to go through and you're going to select your network that your Wi-Fi is on. So ours is Poursteady-net. Type in your password for your network, not for your the Poursteady account. Alrighty, and then you'll get this little pop-up that's saying that it's applying the changes. Once the device is connected, it will either show a successful connection with lights blinking on your Poursteady, or it'll revert to going back to selecting your network, and then you'll be able to re-go through this process again if needed. Alright, and our lights just blinked on our Poursteady, and we can see over on our dongle that the lights are greened up and ready to go. Back on the my.poursteady, you might need to hit refresh a few times for it to finalize that connection for that gray light to turn green. And we're all set. All right, and now with your Poursteady all set up and connected to the boiler, we had it able to boot in home correctly, and it's connected to the internet where we can use our my.poursteady app to fine-tune all those recipes to make that perfect pour over. We are all set to enjoy that first cup. Happy brewing!